Патроны как попало, беспорядочно закинуты в окоп. Бойцы.
From the mountain of bones to this guy smiling painfully, here are the 20 scariest photos from the past that will haunt your dreams. First of all, we have Stefan Browski, famously known as Lionel the Lion-Faced Man, a sideshow performer from the early 20th century. Born in 1890 in Congress, Poland, he was born with a rare condition called hypertrichosis, which covered his entire body with a long hair, resembling that of a lion. His mother attributed this condition to a bizarre encounter where she claimed his father was mauled by a lion while she was pregnant. At the age of 4, Browski was handed to a German impresario who gave him his stage name and showcased him across Europe. By the time he reached adulthood, his facial hair grew to about 20 centimeters, with 10-centimeter hair everywhere else, except on his palms and soles. He eventually traveled to the United States, performing with the Barnum and Bailey Circus, captivating audiences with both his physical appearance and surprisingly gentle demeanor. After retiring in the late 1920s, he returned to Germany and passed away from a heart attack in 1932, leaving behind a legacy as an unforgettable showbiz oddity. But next, take a look at this photo. We see a massive pile of American bison skulls stacked like a mountain in Detroit, Michigan. This haunting scene isn't just a macabre display. It carries a dark secret of environmental racism and historical injustice. The United States Army encouraged the widespread slaughter of American bison. But why? They aimed to force Native Americans off their traditional lands, pushing them into reservations further west. By eradicating the bison, they stripped Native Americans of their primary food source and way of life. Let's take a moment to understand this. Environmental racism isn't about pollution or toxic waste. It's when environmental policies or practices disproportionately affect a racial or ethnic group. In this case, the bison slaughter was a deliberate act to displace Native Americans, showing how environmental actions can have devastating social and cultural impacts. This isn't an isolated incident. Fast forward to 1971 in Papua New Guinea. The construction of the Panguna copper mine brought significant environmental destruction, but it was the indigenous people of the Bougainville Island who bore the brunt of it. Their land, once lush and fertile, became polluted and barren. The mine promised progress and wealth, but for the island's inhabitants, it brought only suffering and loss. In Ecuador, the Largo Agrio oil field is another grim example. Constructed by Texaco, the oil field's hazardous waste wasn't properly disposed of. The result? Widespread contamination affecting the local communities. In 1993, 30,000 people, primarily from ethnic minorities, filed a lawsuit against Texaco. The fight for justice revealed a stark reality. Afro-Ecuadorians and other people of African descent faced greater challenges in accessing clean water, with minimal response from the state. Next, imagine a snapshot from a time when children toiled in factories. Their innocent faces etched with exhaustion and fear. In those days, as factories emerged like behemoths across England and the United States, children became a crucial source of cheap labor. They operated machines beyond their years, navigating perilous conditions with the naivety of youth. But behind their small frames lay a dark truth. Many were coerced into this life threatened with abuse if they dared resist. Imagine the horror of a child, barely able to reach the machine's controls, forced into such grueling labor just to earn a pittance. Child labor wasn't just a moral issue, it was a societal stain. By the mid-1800s, it had become a pervasive problem, exploiting vulnerable children from poor families who had little choice but to work for survival. These children, some as young as 4 years old, endured unimaginable hardships. They toiled from 12 to 18 hours a day, 6 days a week, in factories that were hazardous death traps. Their lives were devoid of play, rest, or education, luxuries stolen by the relentless demands of industrial production. The Keating-Owen Act of 1916 marked a turning point. It sought to regulate child labor and restrict the employment of children under the age of 14. But what about an ancient diving suit, not crafted from metal as you might expect?
No part of the testing and inspection operation is more important than the attention given to...
But from cowskin. Yes, you heard that right. An eerie and remarkably preserved artifact known as the Old Gentleman of Rahi, dating back to the 18th century. Let's dive into the details. Established in 1862, the Rahi Museum in Finland proudly houses this unique piece of maritime history. It was donated by Captain Johan Lufstadius, and its origin, though speculated to be Finnish due to distinctive local design cues, remains shrouded in mystery. The suit's craftsmanship is astonishing, stitched with pitch thread and sealed to be waterproof with a blend of mutton tallow, tar, and pitch. Imagine the brave diver of yesteryears squeezing into this suit through a hole in its stomach, securing it with a leather strap around their waist. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. This diving suit wasn't just a showpiece. It enabled underwater inspections of ship bottoms without the need for dry docking, a revolutionary feat in maritime technology of its time. Air was pumped into the suit through bellows, sustaining the diver as they explored beneath the waves. This technological marvel was at the forefront of diving innovations during the 18th century, bridging the gap between early diving bells and the heavy suits that followed. In May 1948, on a rainy day near Chillicothe, Ohio, Locomotive 3020, a formidable Class 210, was hauling a C&O train westbound. As it chugged through a quiet field, disaster struck with a deafening explosion. The blast was so intense that it shook the nearby homes, knocking over furniture and startling residents like Dick Vincent and his wife, who quickly sprung into action. Vincent, hearing the blast, knew an eastbound train was approaching. With heroic resolve, he raced down the tracks to flag it down, preventing a potential collision with the debris strewn across the rail line. Meanwhile, amidst the chaos, Mrs. Vincent found herself assisting a crew member, scalded and blinded by the explosion, seeking refuge in her yard. Tragically, the explosion claimed the lives of 3 crew members: fireman T.R. Lauder, front brakeman W.C. Bush, and engineer W.R. Terry. Among them was a crew member on his final run before retirement, adding a poignant layer to the tragedy. Pieces of the locomotive, still streaming and twisted, were scattered across the fields, and even the barbed wire fences flattened by the force of the blast. While the exact cause of the explosion remains uncertain, theories suggest it stemmed from low water levels in the locomotive's boiler. In a bid to surmount a steep grade, the crew may have pushed the limits, risking a catastrophe overheating of the crown sheet. The result? A devastating rupture that reverberated for miles around. Moving on to the 1935 Christmas parade in Tacoma, where festive cheer turned into a surreal nightmare. It was the day after Thanksgiving. a time when downtown Tacoma geared up for the holidays with a merry parade. The idea was innocent enough, a Toyland-themed extravaganza to kick off the shopping season and bring joy to Depression-era families. Children adorned in makeshift costumes eagerly awaited alongside Santa Claus. Little did they know, fate had a different script in mind. As the parade set off, a dense fog rolled in, shrouding the streets in an eerie mist. What emerged from the haze were not the joyful characters from storybooks, but grotesque masks and bizarrely oversized clown heads. The floats, intended to dazzle, instead invoked unease with their unsettling designs. Even the band, missing most of its members, played a discordant tune amidst the foggy backdrop. Just think of it. Freezing clowns, bewildered fairy tale figures, and perplexed organizers trapped in a spectral landscape. Amidst this surreal chaos stood a photographer, his lens capturing the absurdity with a darkly comedic twist. After that fateful year, Tacoma chose a more traditional path for its Christmas parades, sticking with Santa and steering clear of Toyland nightmares. Don't just get bored, folks, because there are still so many more creepy things to uncover. In 1925, a devastating fire engulfed Madame Tussauds Waxwork Museum in central London, leaving behind a haunting legacy captured in a chilling photograph from that fateful day. The museum, founded by Madame Marie Tussaud in 1835 near Baker Street, gained notoriety not only for its lifelike wax figures, but also for its grim chamber of horrors, showcasing infamous criminals and historical atrocities. The fire erupted on March 23rd, casting an eerie glow over the night sky as flames soared 50 feet high. Witnesses recounted hearing the unsettling sizzle of melting wax as the inferno consumed centuries of meticulously crafted artistry. Madame Tussaud, a French artist renowned for her detailed wax replicas, initially gained fame during the French Revolution by immortalizing victims of the guillotine, later bringing her macabre art to London. At the time of the blaze, the museum housed approximately 400 wax figures, ranging from celebrities to criminals, each painstakingly created and displayed to captivate and unsettle visitors. The fire spared few of these figures. Many were irreparably damaged or reduced to eerie remnants amidst the charred ruins. The photography from that night still serves as a chilling reminder of the destruction wrought upon Madame Tussauds' life's work. But in the eerie annals of medical history, the infamous plague doctor outfit stands as a haunting symbol of disease and death.
The bubonic plague is caused by deadly bacteria called Yersinia pestis.
Originating in the late Renaissance and early modern periods, these unsettling costumes were donned by physicians during outbreaks of bubonic plague across Europe. The attire, a curious blend of practicality and superstition, comprises a leather hat, wax linen robe, gloves, and a distinctive mask featuring glass eyes and a beak resembling a bird's snout. This peculiar beak, often filled with aromatic herbs like lavender and peppermint, aimed not only to ward off foul odors, but also to shield wearers from what was then believed to be the disease's principal cause, miasma, or bad air. Think of encountering one of these figures on a dimly lit medieval street. The wide-brimmed leather hat and long-beaked mask would certainly invoke a sense of dread, akin to facing mortality itself. Plague doctors wielded wooden canes not just for examination, but also to maintain a cautious distance from the potentially infected individuals, even using them to handle clothing from plague victims without direct contact. Historically, the costume's origins remain shrouded in mystery, with early depictions often appearing in satirical writings and political cartoons rather than detailed medical treatises. However, by the 17th century, during the height of plague outbreaks in Europe, these outfits were widely worn by physicians like Charles Delorme, who outfitted himself in Moroccan goat leather imbued with protective herbs. The plague doctor's role extended beyond medical care. They became harbingers of doom in the eyes of many. Patients often saw them as the last portent before succumbing to the disease's ravages, adding to the costume's chilling reputation. Despite the costume's grim associations, historical research suggests it did offer some protection against the plague's spread, shielding wearers from bodily fluids and possibly even fleas, the true carriers of the disease. Centuries later, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the haunting silhouette of the plague doctor once again emerged in popular culture. From social media snapshots to public appearances, people found resonance with this ancient attire as they faced a modern pandemic. The eerie allure of the beaked mask and its historical connotations continue to captivate imaginations, reminding us of humanity's enduring struggle against infectious diseases throughout the ages. During the First World War, the emergence of snipers wielding scoped rifles brought a new level of terror to the trenches.
So he trained his troops to fight in the open warfare. The British and French generals thought he was crazy.
Unlike previous sharpshooters, these snipers could accurately target enemies from great distances, often from concealed positions. The German Imperial Army pioneered the use of scoped rifles, prompting the British and French to quickly adopt them in response to the deadly effectiveness observed on the battlefield. These sharpshooters were masters of concealment, blending into their surroundings with increasing sophistication as camouflage techniques evolved during the war. Soldiers learned to be hypervigilant, minimizing exposure and movement to avoid becoming a sniper's next victim. To counter this deadly threat, inventive camouflage units crafted decoys known as papier-mâché heads. Before the war, papier-mâché was widely used for making dolls and amusement park components due to its affordability and moldability. At the front lines, skilled sculptors meticulously fashioned these decoy heads to resemble human heads, complete with lifelike facial features and even painted skin tones to deceive snipers looking through magnified scopes. To enhance realism and attract sniper attention, some decoys were fitted with rubber surgical tubes and a cigarette, creating the illusion of a soldier casually smoking. These decoys were mounted on long sticks and strategically placed above trench parapets. If a sniper fell for the ruse and fired upon a decoyed head, the bullet holes provided clues for locating the sniper's position using triangulation techniques or periscopes inserted into the head. This innovative use of decoy heads was pioneered by the British, who faced significant challenges from German snipers early in the war. It became a crucial tactic across all sides, illustrating the desperate measures taken to combat the elusive threat posed by enemy marksmen. Once a sniper's location was identified, artillery bombardment or counter-sniping operations would swiftly follow to neutralize the threat. The deployment of papier-mâché heads is a deadly game of cat and mouse, highlighting both the ingenuity and the grim reality of trench warfare. It reflects the lengths to which military strategists and soldiers went to gain an advantage in a conflict characterized by its stagnant and lethal nature. Now let's get back into the 1950s, where New York was gripped by fear due to a mysterious and relentless bomber known as the Mad Bomber.
Various parts of New York, and a 16-year hunt ended with his arrest. A grievance against his former employers.
George Peter Metesky, an American electrician and mechanic, unleashed a reign of terror that spanned 16 years, planting explosives in various public places, including theaters, terminals, libraries, and offices. His bombs were ingeniously concealed in phone booths, storage lockers, restrooms, and even inside movie theater seats, designed to cause maximum disruption and fear. Metesky's spree of bombings was fueled by deep-seated anger and resentment stemming from a workplace injury years earlier. In his twisted quest for revenge, he planted at least 33 bombs, out of which 22 exploded, injuring 15 people. The bombs were strategically placed across iconic locations such as Grand Central Terminal, Pennsylvania Station, Radio City Music Hall, and even in the New York City subway, demonstrating a chilling disregard for public safety. What makes Metesky's story both terrifying and strangely intriguing is the meticulous planning and execution of his attacks. He evaded capture for years, eluding law enforcement's grasp through careful planning and the use of aliases. The hunt for him marked an early use of criminal profiling, with investigators analyzing his letters to newspapers for clues that eventually led to his arrest in 1957. When apprehended, Metesky was found legally insane and unfit to stand trial. He was committed to a state mental hospital, where he spent a significant portion of his life. His case highlighted gaps in mental health treatment and the challenges of dealing with individuals driven to violence by perceived grievances. Despite the seriousness of his crimes, there's a bizarre element to Metesky's story, particularly in how he meticulously detailed his bombings to police upon his arrest. He saw himself as a victim of injustice, seeking notoriety and redress through his violent actions. But now, before we continue, make sure to give this video a like and also hit that subscribe button for more such content. Now, let's get back to it. Russian fisherman Roman Sidortsov has spent 18 years working on a trawler, pulling up bizarre and eerie deep-sea creatures from the ocean floor. Based in Murmansk, a major port city, Fedortsov specializes in fish processing, ensuring the catch is prepared for freezing and delivery to customers. During his shifts, known as watches, which alternate between work and rest every 6 hours, he oversees fish processing at the factory on board. In his spare moments, Fedortsov captures photos of the strange creatures that surface from depths between 980 to 3,300 feet. These creatures, ranging from frilled sharks to other unidentified species, often surprise the crew as they haul in commercial fish like cod and haddock from the Norwegian Sea, the Barents Sea, and the Atlantic Ocean. Some of these deep-sea creatures are brought up alive, and we release them back into the ocean when possible, Fedortsov shares. Unfortunately, many do not survive the journey to the surface. Fedortsov's photos provide a rare glimpse into the mysterious world beneath the waves, where life takes on strange and often unsettling forms. Despite the eerie nature of his discoveries, Fedortsov continues to document these encounters, shedding light on the diverse and sometimes chilling inhabitants of the deep sea. But next, this photo is not AI-generated or any kind of Photoshop manipulation. It's real. NASA's astronaut selection process is as rigorous as it gets. If you dream of space, you'll need more than a degree in scientific know-how. The journey to become an astronaut involves meticulous psychological evaluation to weed out anyone unfit for the challenges of space travel. More than 6,000 hopefuls apply each selection cycle, and only a handful, typically around 8 individuals, make the cut. The process isn't swift. It can take up to 2 years from application to final selection, sometimes even longer. We're searching for the right stuff while ensuring we avoid the wrong stuff, explains Kelly Slack, a psychologist involved in NASA's astronaut selection panel. The criteria extend beyond academic qualifications. Candidates must exhibit resilience and exceptional social skills, akin to being a good neighbor. The evaluation process unfolds in two phases. Initially, candidates undergo intensive interviews to gauge their suitability. Later, they face psychiatric assessments to screen for any underlying psychological issues that could pose risks in space. Field exercises at Johnson Space Center simulate the isolation and challenges astronauts will face, although specifics are confidential for security reasons. Existing psychiatric disorders or significant interpersonal issues could lead to disqualification, warns Jamie Barrett, another psychologist involved in the selection. The extreme conditions of space demand individuals who can cope with isolation and stress without compromise. Next, in the annals of medical anomalies, the story of Edward Mordake stands out as a chilling example of human deformity and tragedy. Born in the 19th century to English nobility, Mordake's affliction was a rare and grotesque one. He possessed a second face on the back of his head. This demon face, as he called it, was said to be that of a beautiful girl, yet twisted with malevolent intelligence. The eerie face could not see, eat, or speak, but it sneered when Mordake was happy, and smiled when he wept, a haunting paradox that tormented him day and night. Mordake claimed the face whispered unspeakable horrors to him, driving him to seclusion and despair. Despite his pleas, no doctor dared attempt its removal, leaving Mordake to suffer in solitude. Described as a man of grace and scholarly attainment, Mordake was a gifted musician and scholar, yet his life was overshadowed by the relentless presence of his devil twin. He lived in complete isolation, refusing even his family's visits until his tragic end. At the age of 23, unable to bear the incessant torment any longer, Mordake took his own life with poison, leaving behind a chilling request to destroy the demon face before his burial, lest its whispers haunt him, even in death. Born in 1952 in Bavaria, West Germany, Anneliese was raised in a devout Catholic family where religious fervor shaped her upbringing. Her life took a dark turn at 16 when she began experiencing inexplicable blackouts and trance-like states, often accompanied by disturbing behaviors like bedwetting and hallucinations. Diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy, Anneliese's condition deteriorated despite medical treatment. She became convinced she was possessed by demons, refusing conventional therapies and instead seeking religious intervention. This led her family to enlist the help of Father Arnold Renz and Ernest Alt, who, after much persuasion, secured permission from Bishop Joseph Stengel to perform an exorcism. Over the course of 67 sessions spread across almost a year, Anneliese endured grueling rituals aimed at expelling the demons: Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, Adolf Hitler, Nero, and Fleischmann from her body. The exorcisms, documented and recorded, were physically punishing. Anneliese stopped eating, lost significant weight, and suffered from dehydration and malnutrition. Despite these alarming signs, the rituals persisted until her death in July 1976, at the age of 23. Keep watching, guys, because some of the most disgusting stories are about to be uncovered. In 1963, Reverend Kenneth F. Lord captured one of the most eerie photographs ever taken at Newbie Hall's Church of Christ the Counselor in Yorkshire. Known as the Newbie Monk, or the Spectre of Newbie Church, this ghostly apparition appeared mysteriously in the developed photograph, despite not being visible at the time of the snapshot. The figure, resembling a monk cloaked in white with a blurred face, instantly sparked speculation and fascination across Britain. Some suggested it resembles a 16th century monk, possibly concealing a disfigured face due to leprosy. However, Skeptics humorously argue that the monk might just be someone wrapped in bedsheets or standing on a box to appear 9 feet tall. Despite investigations by photographic experts showing no signs of tampering, debates continue whether the image might be a result of double exposure, where 2 images overlap to create a single, ghostly figure. To this day, the mystery behind the Newbie Monk persists, captivating tabloids, paranormal enthusiasts, and skeptics alike. Interestingly, Newbie Church itself, founded in 1876, is not typically associated with ghostly activities beyond this famous photograph. Its construction was a tribute to Frederick Viner, who tragically lost his life during a kidnapping in Greece. His mother used ransom money collected for his release to build Christ the Counselor, ensuring his memory endured through the ages in this hauntingly beautiful setting. But in medieval Europe, particularly in the High and Late Middle Ages, one of the most dreaded punishments was confinement in an oubliette. The term oubliette originates from the French word oublier, meaning to forget, aptly describing the fate of those imprisoned within. These dungeons were typically narrow pits, accessed only through a trapdoor in the ceiling, where prisoners were thrown and left to languish in darkness. They often had no space to stand or move, forcing them into a seated or lying position for months or even years. The intention was to instill terror and ensure the victim's slow deterioration of sanity and health. Unlike conventional dungeons located in castle basements, oubliettes were sometimes built into the upper walls of structures, adding to the psychological torment by keeping prisoners within earshot of everyday life while they suffered in isolation. Victims of oubliettes ranged from political prisoners to those accused of crimes like treason or witchcraft. The dungeons were tools of psychological and physical torture aimed at breaking the spirit and punishing perceived enemies or dissenters in the feudal society of medieval Europe. In the early 1900s, American soldiers stationed in Havana, Cuba, were captured in vintage photographs posing with human skulls collected from Colon Cemetery. The cemetery, founded in 1876, became known for its boneyard, where unclaimed remains were eventually discarded. American soldiers, in a peculiar practice, used to display these skulls and bones, even posing for souvenir postcards sold commercially. General Brooke eventually ordered an end to this macabre activity, directing the burial pit to be covered. But still, the Chernobyl disaster of April 26, 1986, remains one of the most catastrophic nuclear accidents in history. It began with a routine test at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, where operators initiated a series of actions that led to a catastrophic chain reaction. During the test, a sudden power surge caused the reactor core to overheat, leading to a steam explosion that ruptured the reactor casing and ejected radioactive materials into the atmosphere. This initial explosion, estimated to be equivalent to 225 tons of TNT, was followed by a second, more powerful explosion, dispersing the damaged core and further spreading radioactive fallout. In the immediate aftermath, 134 workers displayed symptoms of acute radiation syndrome, and 28 of them died within the first 3 months. The disaster led to the evacuation of approximately 49,000 people from the 10-kilometer exclusion zone around the plant, with an additional 68,000 evacuated later from a wider radius. The Soviet government eventually constructed a massive sarcophagus to contain the radioactive debris, followed by the new safe confinement structure in 2017 to further stabilize the site. Despite the severity of the disaster, The exact number of deaths attributable to Chernobyl remains contentious. The World Health Organization estimated up to 9,000 cancer-related deaths in the affected regions over several decades, though other studies suggest lower figures. But what this guy did to continue his controversial life, which included evading justice and maintaining a notorious reputation among the outlaws of the Wild West. Pete Spence, originally Elliot Larkin Ferguson, lived a notorious life as a small-time criminal in the Wild West during the late 19th century. Born around 1852 in Texas, he gained infamy for his association with outlaw cowboys in Tombstone, Arizona territory. Spence's criminal career began with suspicion of robbery in Texas in 1878 and escalated to stagecoach robbery in Arizona. Despite serving time for manslaughter after fatally pistol whipping a man, Spence was pardoned after just 18 months. In Tombstone, Spence lived across from the Earp brothers and was implicated in the assassination of Morgan Earp in 1882, although legal technicalities prevented his conviction. Known for his partnerships in saloons and mining ventures, Spence's life was intertwined with the lawlessness of the frontier. His involvement with the cowboys, a term synonymous with outlaws and bandits, highlighted the rugged existence in the American West. Spence's later years were spent running a goat ranch near Globe, Arizona, and he eventually married the widow of his friend, Finn Clanton. He died in 1914 and was buried in an unmarked grave in Globe Cemetery, marking the end of a life defined by crime, controversy, and the untamed frontier. At last, don't misjudge, folks, because his smile reflects more pain than joy. During World War I's Battle of Flers Courcelette in September 1916, an iconic photo captured the grim reality of war. Amidst the chaos and carnage of battle, a shell-shocked soldier lies in the trenches, his face etched with a haunting expression. This soldier, like many others, faced unimaginable psychological trauma from the relentless artillery bombardments and the horrors of combat. The soldier in the photograph, surrounded by wounded comrades and medical aid, presents a paradoxical image. He smiles, a stark contrast to the grim reality around him. And that's all for today's episode. Now, if you found this video a bit scary, then I don't recommend watching this video on your right-hand side.